I remember the day she left as if it was pressed into my bones. The morning air was colder than usual and the kitchen smelled like burnt toast. Lena stood by the door with her suitcase, her eyes not quite meeting mine. She wasn't crying, but she wasn't smiling either. It was that blank in-between look that told me she'd already left long before her feet even touched the road outside. I asked her if there was someone else. She didn't answer. She just said, "I need to find myself, Daniel." The kind of line that feels borrowed from a movie script. I wanted to laugh, but my throat wouldn't let me. She walked away while I stood there in the doorway, holding a mug that had gone cold, realizing I didn't even know what finding yourself meant anymore. For years, Lena and I had built a small, simple life in that little town. We weren't rich, but we were content. Or at least I thought we were. I worked as a carpenter, making tables, chairs, fixing roofs, whatever folks needed. She worked part-time at the library, said she loved the smell of old pages and coffee. We used to sit by the river on Sundays, feed the ducks, talk about maybe getting a dog someday. All those quiet dreams that sound small but mean everything when they're real. But something shifted about a year before she left. She started dressing differently, spending more time out with friends. She began talking about the world outside our little town, like it was a paradise we'd been too blind to see. I told myself it was just a phase, that she'd come back around like the seasons do, but seasons don't always return the same way. Some end quietly, some just die out. After she left, the house felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by absence. Every room had her echo in it. The couch still had her favorite blanket thrown across the armrest. The bathroom mirror still fogged up where she'd left little heart shapes when she'd come out of the shower. I couldn't throw those things away, not yet. It felt like erasing proof that we ever existed. People in town tried to be kind, but kindness can sting when it's laced with pity. "She'll come back," they'd say. Or, "You're better off without her." They didn't know that both sentences could hurt just the same. The nights were the worst. You can ignore loneliness during the day, but at night it sits next to you, breathes your air, makes itself at home. I'd lie awake listening to the clock, wondering if she was sleeping peacefully somewhere else, if she ever thought of me. For weeks I tried not to think about where she'd gone. But small towns have big mouths, and news travels faster than healing ever can. One morning at the grocery store, I overheard two women talking near the fruit aisle. "Lena's in the city now. Moved in with that man from the real estate office. You know, the one who came around last summer?" I froze, holding an apple like it had betrayed me. I didn't need more details. I already had enough. She'd left not to find herself, but to find someone else. I walked home in silence that day. Didn't even turn on the lights when I got in. Just sat there, trying to make sense of how someone could share your life for years and then walk out like it was a bad movie ending they didn't want to watch anymore. I went through stages: anger, denial, self-blame. I even wrote her letters I never sent. Some were apologies for things I didn't do. Some were just blank pages with her name written on top. I told myself I'd burn them someday, but instead I kept them in a box under the bed like an ache I didn't want to heal yet. Months passed. The pain dulled, but it never vanished. Then came the moment that changed everything. I was at the local diner, same booth I always sat in, when an old friend, Mark, slid into the seat across from me. He looked uncomfortable, like someone carrying bad news. "Daniel," he said carefully, "I saw Lena last weekend in the city. She didn't look happy. I think that guy she's with, he's not treating her right." I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to smile, part of me wanted to scream, but mostly I just felt tired. Mark told me he'd overheard them arguing. The man had been cheating on her, spending her money, using her as arm candy. For the first time in months, I felt something other than sadness. I felt quiet clarity, the kind that comes before a storm. That night, I walked down to the river, the same place Lena and I used to sit. The moonlight rippled on the water, and for the first time, it didn't hurt to look at it. I realized then that revenge doesn't always mean destruction. Sometimes the best revenge is resurrection, rebuilding yourself so completely that the person who broke you no longer recognizes the version they left behind. I went home and pulled out the box of letters I'd written her. Instead of burning them, I read each one out loud, every unsent apology, every unanswered question. And then I put them in the fireplace one by one. Watching the flames eat through the paper felt like watching the past dissolve into smoke. The next morning I shaved, put on my cleanest shirt, and went to work. Not because I felt better, but because I was tired of feeling worse. I started taking more jobs, helping people fix their homes, build new ones. Every nail I hammered, every plank I smoothed down felt like stitching myself back together. People began to notice. "You've changed, Daniel," they'd say. I didn't know if that was good or bad, but I kept going. I joined a local workshop, started teaching younger carpenters. Somewhere between those long days and quiet nights, I found something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Months kept passing like quiet visitors, and soon a year had gone by. My life didn't transform overnight. It unfolded gently but firmly, the way winter turns to spring. I learned to enjoy silence again. The same river where I once sat broken became my favorite place to breathe. Sometimes I'd sit there after work, watching the reflection of my rebuilt workshop across the water. It wasn't just a building. It was a symbol of something I thought I'd lost forever: purpose. My business began to grow in ways I hadn't expected. People trusted my craft. Word spread from one town to another, and soon I was getting calls from nearby cities. I didn't chase money. I just worked with care. Maybe that's why success came quietly, like it was sneaking up to surprise me. I saved enough to buy new tools, then a small truck, and eventually I hired 2 apprentices. Teaching them reminded me that even after being broken, you can still help build others. One evening, while finishing up paperwork at the shop, I got a message from someone I hadn't thought about in months. It was from Lena. The name on my phone froze me. For a moment, I didn't know if I should open it. But curiosity, or maybe closure, made me tap. The message was short. "Hey Daniel, I hope you're doing well. I'm back in town for a while. Could we talk?" I stared at those words for a long time, not because I missed her, but because I didn't recognize the power she once had over me. I wasn't angry, just calm. I waited 2 days before replying. "Sure, coffee at the diner Thursday at noon." She agreed. Thursday came, and I found myself sitting at the same booth where I used to eat alone after she left. The smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. She looked smaller somehow, not physically but in spirit. Her eyes had lost that spark of arrogance they used to carry. She smiled nervously when she saw me, like someone approaching a locked door they're not sure they still have the key to. "Hi, Daniel," she said softly. I nodded. "Hi, Lena, you look..." "Well," she laughed, but it broke halfway through. "You don't have to be polite." "I know I don't." There was silence between us for a few seconds, and then she started talking. Really talking. She told me everything. How the man she'd left with had promised her a new life, how he'd used her, cheated on her, drained her savings. How she'd tried to come back to herself but didn't know how. She said she thought of me every day but couldn't bring herself to face me until now. I listened quietly. The strange thing was, I didn't feel satisfaction or anger. I just felt distance, like hearing a story about people who used to live in a house I once passed by. When she finally looked up, her eyes were full of tears. "I'm so sorry, Daniel," she whispered. "I hurt you in ways I can't undo. I thought the grass was greener." It wasn't, it was just painted. I took a breath and looked out the diner window. The river shimmered in the distance, and for a second, I saw the reflection of who I used to be sitting beside her. The old Daniel who would have begged, shouted, maybe even forgiven just to have her back. But that man wasn't here anymore. "Lena," I said quietly, "you don't owe me anything. We were both young. You made a choice, and I learned from it. Maybe that's all it was meant to be." She covered her face, crying quietly. People around us pretended not to look. I wanted to comfort her, but not the way I once did. I just reached across the table and gently touched her hand for a second. "I forgive you," I said. She looked up, shocked. "You do?" "Yes, but forgiveness doesn't mean we start over. It means I'm finally free." She nodded slowly, tears still falling. "You've changed," she whispered. I smiled a little. I had to. We finished our coffee mostly in silence. When she left, she turned back once at the door, as if expecting me to stop her. But I didn't, I just smiled and raised my cup. She gave a small, sad smile back, and then she was gone. For good this time. That night I walked to the river again. The same one where I once burned those letters. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and rain. I sat on the bench we used to share, but this time it didn't feel haunted. It felt still. I thought about everything: love, loss, revenge, forgiveness. I realized that life doesn't always give you closure wrapped neatly in justice. Sometimes it gives you peace disguised as emptiness, and if you're patient enough, you learn to see the difference. I never saw Lena again after that day. But word around town said she moved to another state, started working at a small bookstore. I hoped she found some kind of peace too. I didn't hate her anymore. Hate takes too much space, and I needed room for better things. Over the next few years, my business flourished. I bought a small house by the edge of town, surrounded by trees and silence. On weekends, I'd drive out to the lake, sit there with a book or a fishing rod and just listen to the world hum softly. Sometimes I'd think of her, not with pain, but with a quiet kind of gratitude, because without losing her, I might never have found myself. Funny how that works. Sometimes the person who breaks you is the one who forces you to rebuild into someone stronger, wiser, and far more whole than you ever were. People in town still talk sometimes. They say Daniel turned out just fine. Maybe they're right, but I think it's more than that. I didn't just turn out fine. I turned out free. And freedom, I learned, is the sweetest revenge of all.